Yeah. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to Philanthropy Impact's Walk in My Shoes member series, which is carefully curated as a resource to support you as you help clients to navigate the philanthropy and impact investment space. My name is Sophie Sanik, and I'm the Director of Membership and Development here at Philanthropy Impact, and the person to talk to if you'd like to know more about our training and how to make the most of your membership. I will share my email in the chat or at the end of the session for those watching the recording today. As we embark on a brand new year, we wanted to revisit the topic, managing in this unprecedented time and what it means for the advisory space, now almost 2 years later. For this, we welcome back Alana Petraske, who's partner at Withersworldwide, as our chair. And joining Alana, we welcome back Ceris, Gardner, partner at Maurice, Turnor, Gardner, and Roni Hall, who's the partner and head of philanthropy at Hoare & Co. As always, we'll be keeping this discussion strictly to 30 minutes, so it will go quickly, but we encourage you to use the chat to introduce yourselves and have your say and post questions to our panel. Please make sure to select everyone when posting in the chats that all can see. Please do get involved today, as we'd really love to hear from you. Thank you all for joining us, and I will now hand over to Alana to make us start. Thank you, Alana.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sophie, and thanks everyone for joining today. Ceris, Rennie, great to see you both. It's been a while since we had a chance to chat. Rennie, before we started, you said, here we are starting off the year with a webinar, starting off on Zoom. So sort of the way we mean to go on, isn't it? Extraordinary times that we're in. Let's just jump in and have this chat. 30 minutes always seems to zoom by quickly. So Ceris, let's start with you. So good to see you. Do introduce yourself a little bit more fully, please, than Sophie did. But after you do so, just give us a little bit of a picture of where things are with you and your advisory practice, working with high net worth individuals, and how things have changed.
Yeah, with pleasure. So I'm Ceris Gardner. The main purpose of me being here is I'm a trustee of Philanthropy Impact, and very much enjoying participating in everything that Philanthropy Impact does. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I advise, as Alana's just alluded to, high net worth individuals for the most part, but also charities and charity trustees. The reason for being here today is to bring you up to speed on what's been happening over the last couple of years, because it is staggering to think we've been in this position for a couple of years now. And just to pick up on Alana's point, what have I been seeing over this period, and where are we in terms of the work? Just the workplace. Well, having got back to work, I'm actually in the office for about 2 months. Now I'm back working from home again, as most people are, I think, in the professional advisors sphere. So, it's sort of same old, back to the house. However, things are changing. I think there's a little bit more optimism amongst people, despite the Omicron wave. And certainly I'm still seeing colleagues of mine going into the office because they want to be there. Not so much necessarily a business need, but maybe mental health need, a well-being need. But certainly, the office is not empty. However, it's not full either by any means. And as you can see, I'm pretty much working from home. One of the big themes that I've seen over the last couple of years, and it's going to sound morbid, but I don't mean it to be, is mortality. Nearly all of my clients have been thinking very much more about their mortality. Now, to start with, obviously, it was because the initial waves of COVID were dramatic and extremely serious if you caught COVID. And there were so many awful reports about people dying in hospital at all ages. I know it started with the elderly, but it became all ages. And it was really, really desperately sad to hear the stories. Now, we've come through that, it seems, to this stage, and I don't want to by any means denigrate the huge losses that we've all suffered during that period. But there's a slight feeling of optimism in the air that we will come through this sometime later this year. It might even be 2023, but certainly within the next sort of year or so. But what are my clients asking me? Well, what they're really looking at is, ignore for the moment the philanthropy side, because it is linked in, and I'll come on to that in a second. It's more, we've been so rocked by all of this as people generally, that they're concerned that they haven't got their affairs in order. And so for the last 2 years, we have been very, very busy helping clients get their affairs in order. And that means succession planning for the most part. So, wills, trusts, gifts, earlier than they might otherwise have thought of making them. Moving house, so they might be moving out of cities into the countryside, but actually also moving abroad, out of the UK or even into the UK, and combine all that with philanthropy and the thought that they really do want to do good and make sure that people are being looked after. Then there's been a big focus in the last 12 months in particular in my practice on philanthropy and how that can be utilised to the best advantage to help people, if not through the pandemic itself, then related topics that have come to the fore during the last year to 2 years, and I count in that climate change, the cancel culture, so-called, all those issues that we're all seeing and experiencing. So that's really where I come from, Alana, at the moment.
Wonderful. There's about 3-4 hour sessions in there of various
absolutely
around around being mobile, around attention to local issues, global issues, mental health, so much in there. Rennie, let's turn to you though, and please do introduce yourself a bit more fully, and let us know how things are for you lately and what you are seeing in your professional life.
Absolutely, and thank you, Alana. So Roni Hall, partner and head of philanthropy at Hoare's Bank, and so that my role, I look at what we do as a family, and as an organisation, we give up to 10% of the bank's profits each year to charity and invest that into social impact investments and make about 300 grants a year. As a family, we have an amazing bank attached, and over half of employees are involved with Give As You Earn. And this year, the bank's celebrating its 350th anniversary. So there's a huge amount more of how do we tie in those resources and look at volunteering and not just finance only assistance. And then the final part of my role is that I am the chair of our trust department. And underneath that, we have a donor advised fund, which really in September, it celebrated 10 years, and in that time, it's gone from strength to strength. Now stands at £250 million. And since the pandemic has hit, £90 million has been donated out by just over 100 donors. So you've really had a big stepping up of customers identifying that there are problems and assisting where there is required need. I think when looking at trends and looking at what more broadly is out there and happening, it feels that this near 2 years, people are beginning to plan and take those inputs and start to put in place reactions to it and structures. I think Ceris's point about inside client bases, inside customer bases, there are people wanting to put in place appropriate structures. I think actually at an organisation level as well, what I'm seeing is that people are looking at how can they shift their advice, how can they shift the way that they're helping out their customers. One of the particular strands that I think is very, very interesting is an acknowledgement that to create the best-in-class services that they want to provide, they cannot do it all themselves. And so there is a development where people are looking for close-knit partnerships with like-minded organisations that they know can provide high-quality services. And that, I think, is a really exciting development, and I can see that playing out in force over 2022.
Brilliant. I'm so interested to know whether you see, either of you see clients or donors who are really changing their attitudes to giving or have mobilized in a different way. Rennie, for instance, you mentioned the really staggering amount of distributions made by the Master Charitable Trust in the last year. And it sounds as if that is responsive to the need that donors are seeing around them. My perception is that, you know, the pandemic really has brought to the fore people's awareness of need. And so, you know, in some cases, you know, a foundation or perhaps a donor advised fund account that was taking a back seat in somebody's mind may have really come to the fore in terms of the things they're thinking about. So are you seeing donors more interested in giving or more interested in giving more or otherwise, you know, interested in giving in a different way, perhaps? Rennie, let's start with.
I think there are two strands to what I've seen. One is that certainly with the Master Charitable Trust donations, the 12 eligible areas of charitable activity as designated in the 2011 Charities Act, none of those segments has received less than what they did when compared with the 18 months before COVID hit. So there hasn't been a substitution of funding. People have remained funding at the same level from what they were already participating in, but where they've seen particular areas of stresses and needs, they've stepped up in a far greater quantum. So already education was one of our largest segments that we gave to, and that has had a threefold increase. It's gone up to 30 million that's gone to education out of that 90 million. So that is people seeing that either there are bits in society where there's been additional stresses and you need to build in with digital resources and changing and retooling, or it's been a case of there are high quality organizations that are under stress and need to be given that extra ballast and support. So there hasn't been a substitution, which I think is very heartening for the charity sector. The thing that I have seen that is a bit of a change of direction is what's done inside charitable trusts or charitable accounts. And I've seen a much greater embracing of impact investment in that space. So we have definitely in the last 18 months opened a number of accounts for donors where the main bulk of their investments are in social impact investments. And so they are trying to do this thing of twinning both their grants and their investments to maximize the good that they're making.
Interesting. Ceris, are you seeing people give differently in response to the pandemic?
I thought I'm seeing two things really. One is, you mentioned it, Alana, giving more locally in many respects in terms of, you know, directing their funds to the smaller charities that they perceive are in desperate need of funds to keep going. And secondly, I'm seeing a lot more being given to cultural institutions, partly as Rennie mentioned, you know, the areas that are in need. People perceive that, you know, theatres and concert halls and, you know, all the arts that we know and love, they are in desperate need of funding for obvious reasons, you know, due to COVID and other areas, other things I'm sure, but certainly COVID. And so that's where I've seen people directing their funds. But the other thing I wanted to pick up on was, you know, it's great that you know, Hoare's Bank has a donor advised fund. And one of the things that everybody who's listening in, if they know me at all, know that I've been banging on about donor advised funds for a couple of years, well over 2 years now, because I'm a trustee of a donor advised fund. And it is remarkable how in the last, I would say, 12 to 24 months, it's not necessarily COVID related, but it might have a little bit to do with it, that so many more people are talking about them, are aware of them, are using them and actually putting money into them. And, you know, as I jokingly say, it's really part jokingly, by the way, you know, here I am advising clients to put their money into donor advised funds, when actually what I should be saying is, oh, no, please let me set up a charitable foundation for you, because that would mean I get some fees. But of course, if I direct them to a donor advised fund, I don't. But nonetheless, it's always what is best for the client. And that's the important thing. And donor advised funds are so helpful for so many people. And I'm seeing a lot of money now being directed towards donor advised funds. And of course, as Rennie said, those donor advised funds have been making enormous contributions to different charitable entities and for purposes that are beloved of the donors. So yeah, those are the trends I've seen in the last 12 months in particular.
We're sort of rooting for donor advised funds, all of us on this call, I think. They're
We
such
are.
a good tool. I'd love to pull together two things that each of you said quite separately. Ceris, you were talking about our sort of working patterns and also people moving around, moving abroad, perhaps moving out of London, etc. And Rennie, you were talking about the need for sort of expert training and ways to bring in enough sort of expertise to navigate. Ceris, you were talking more about people turning to their estate planning. And one of the things that I've noticed is this issue of mortality is sort of causing people to think about, to think about their own mortality, to make provision and make good estate plans. I hope at a younger age. I'm noticing some of my younger clients actually turning their attention to this, which is very sensible. But that raises some issues around how we as advisors sort of navigate these issues of discussing legacy and discussing what happens in your giving after your death. But all of us are sort of dispersed around. We're not having those in-person events where we can, over a glass of wine, chat with a peer and do some peer-to-peer learning. That to me is a little bit of a perfect storm, of a missed opportunity for learning and developing these key skills around discussing giving and discussing giving after you're gone. That's an open-ended question, but any thoughts on this challenge? How do we sort of get around this? We're obviously doing one thing today, gathering on this webinar, but but what else can we do?
Well, I think a lot of my clients are suffering from Zoom fatigue because we've all been doing this now for nearly 2 years, as I say, and I think people are saying, oh, no, I don't want a video conference. Can we just do a normal conference call? Which is, in a sense, even worse, if you like, than seeing somebody on screen, because at least you can vaguely, see what they're thinking, even though it's not perfect by any means. So I am a bit concerned about where things are going on that score. And do I have any ideas about what we can do? Not many, other than before Christmas. I had a great cheese and wine event, which was on Zoom, and those sorts of things might be helpful, but not necessarily for clients, because they don't necessarily want to be bothered with social events that I might want to organise. But if we can find something that would be suitable for them, that would be maybe something. I know that one of the two, I'm not sure if Hoare's Bank has done it, Rennie, but I know one or two banks were doing things like short performances of concerts or operas, just not the whole opera, obviously, but perhaps a couple of scenes or something, which was produced on Zoom. I just wonder whether that might be a way of, well, at least promoting the arts, if nothing else. I don't know, Rennie, have you got any thoughts on what we could be doing and how things will go?
Well, I think on that engagement side, yes, there's a charity called Intermission Youth Theatre that we've been involved with for over a decade, and what they do is take young adults or children just on that cusp who are at risk of running into some pretty awful situations in their life, and through the power of theatre and Shakespeare come together, build confidence, and lots of them go into higher education. We've done some amazing online sessions with them, which has been great, but also involved them to do the voiceovers of our online app demonstration. All of those things you can build out an ecosystem. But Alana, on your point of how can advisors make a difference where we're diffuse and atomized, I think there is a component about upskilling ourselves so that we're not having to rely on creating those opportunities where you have all of the right people in the room at the right time. And certainly Philanthropy Impact has been developing a whole set of skills to help people on impact investment, on ESG investing in terms of suitability, on really refining the philanthropy offering. And I think that means that at a time where it's quite difficult to schedule Zoom calls or be able to pivot to bring in the right person, you can't just open the door and invite them in. This is quite a good way of continuing those conversations and allowing you to take those clients deeper into conversations than might otherwise be possible.
Excellent. I know there's some exciting accreditation stuff happening at Philanthropy Impact. Let me talk, turn for a moment to, Ceris, you mentioned this word fatigue, as fatigue, but I think there's also some fatigue just generally going around, burnout maybe, but in terms of donors, there's this risk, I think, of people, the sort of urgency that early COVID, early pandemic concerns have been met, and now we're just in this sort of indefinite, perhaps, holding period. And how do we keep people engaged with philanthropy, you know, when there maybe are fewer opportunities to connect face to face or in person, which is always so meaningful for donors? Any ideas on that?
Ooh, tricky. I'm not one of these people who's full of, brimming with ideas. I wish I was, it would be helpful, but it's a really tricky one. I find myself thinking this all the time because, I'm worried that I'm losing contact or might be losing contact with certain clients and not knowing what they're thinking or planning or wanting to do, because for them it's difficult. They feel it's difficult to make contact with me because they can't just sort of say, oh, can we meet tomorrow morning or whatever it may be, which would be the norm. And so that lack of face-to-face contact is causing issues, I think, in terms of, are we postponing things only to discover that it's too late because, you can't do your planning or whatever it may be that you've got in mind for your philanthropy because you can't get hold of the person in the way you want to relate to that person. And that is the thing that scares me for the future at the moment. Go back to my point about optimism, and I'm not naturally necessarily an optimistic person, although probably I am more optimistic than pessimistic. I think that as soon as we can get back to the office, I think clients, within reason and with all the testing and so on that we might have to still do, will want to come into the office by one means or another. I don't know whether you're seeing people coming into the bank, Rennie, or whether that's not happening at the moment. And what about in New York, Alana? We are seeing occasionally a client will say, oh, can I come in for a meeting? So we have seen clients in the office in the last few months, but not many, because they don't want to travel or they don't want to, have all the hassle that's involved at the moment. So yeah, I do worry about what can we do to keep in touch with them. And so I'm trying to, keep a regular telephone call or something like that, or an email just to say, would you like a call, just have a quick catch up, obviously no charge, that sort of thing, just to keep people in touch. But it's hard, and a lot of the more elderly ones don't want to do Zoom or can't do Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever might be the preferred means. So it's a troubling one, actually. Rennie, what are you saying? Be interested to know that.
I think there's a desire for people still to use telephone quite a bit. We recently did a customer survey, and people are happy with Zoom now. It was quite an interesting finding from it, and I think that it has to be a channel of option rather than a channel of it's the only thing that's presented. Of course, people want face to face as being the optimal way, but I think we have to flex the tools that are available to us in the peaks and troughs ahead. I think, Alana, you also asked about donor fatigue, which is an interesting one. I've seen a lot of donors are taking stock, assimilating the information that they've gained over the last 2 years and thinking of what are the tools that they would like to take out of those learnings, what are the things that will shape their approach going forwards. And so looking to give unrestricted funding to organizations that they really understand and trust and want to form those longer term partnerships with, I think is a massively powerful emerging trend. And it's one that if more people can embrace, it will be really powerful going out there and doing some great stuff in the sector. So in terms of, Ceris and the bright spots and trying to be optimist, I think the embracing of much more of that, doing stuff alongside trusted partners and allowing them to add the funds where they think it's going to be most impactful could be a great thing to come out of it.
I thank you so much. I'd love to reconvene a session for a whole hour on trust and unrestricted funding. It's one of the most interesting things happening right now. But Ceris, you mentioned elderly clients, and I just would love to go to the other end of the spectrum real quick. Rennie, I think that you have you work a lot with millennials and younger donors, but I wonder even, if we're now talking about Gen Z and how even the youngest are addressing, are dealing with the universe, engaging with climate change, engaging with political activism, but also, of course, coming into their own as philanthropists and are inherently very tech savvy and ready to Zoom. Any thoughts on Gen Z and working with the youngest clients? Let's start with you, Rennie, please.
So I think from my side, what I've seen is they look at all of the assets that they can bring to bear to a situation. They don't see their impact as cleaved off as just something they're doing with their grant giving. They'll look at their investments, they'll look at the way that they're conducting their life, and if they can add their voice to something through advocacy, that's a legitimate and a very important tool to use. So trying to have a conversation that you're boxing off just in philanthropy probably isn't going to cut it, because they're going to want to look much more broadly across the whole suite of things that they're interacting with. And I've just seen Rick in the Q&A has asked how have donors and clients affected our own philanthropy decisions. One thing that we try to do with our customers is draw together much smaller discussion networks. And so we will host lunches or dinners where we're speaking on a philanthropist to philanthropist basis, and they will then give an insight into what can go wrong and mistakes that have been made. And they have really been powerful for shaping our decisions, particularly in the environmental space, where I think there are possible missteps out there.
I see John has jumped on, so I know that means just about out of time. Ceris, do you want to answer Rick's question really quickly before we turn it back to John?
Yeah, I was going to say that I find the younger generation really thoughtful about their philanthropy, and I don't know, so much more engaged than I've ever seen a young generation before. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of the millennials and Gen Z, as you call them in America, are, I don't know, they're so much more engaged somehow in philanthropy and genuinely want to save the world, if I would put it that broadly. And it's lovely to see. That's what I would say, just to be very, very quick with my thoughts.
Wonderful. I will hand it back to you then, John. I see we have just the 1 minute left. So thank you so much, Ceris and Rennie, and John, back to you.
Thank you, Alana.
Alana, that was brilliant. Thank you. A great start to the new year. Happy New Year to everyone. And thank you for that. And it's really positive when you consider it's just short of 2 months or 2 years that we have been facing this. Really neat to see how positive it is, and with all the generations contributing in different ways. So thank you, Ceris, Rennie, and Alana. There are still lots of issues to address, not only for advisors and how to relate to clients around their philanthropic giving and discussions around their values, but also some key issues that have to be addressed that we will be in the future. So can I just traditionally say final words of wisdom, 30 seconds, and Who would like to start? Ceris.
Okay, well, I have a prediction, which is that we're going to see a lot more of the younger generation coming through, both as clients and as philanthropists, for all sorts of reasons. But, you know, as I say, because they are such a thoughtful and they do care about the environment, about the world in general, what's happening around them. And that's what I see coming our way in the next sort of 1 to 2 years.
Thank you very much. Renee.
I think that things have shifted quite markedly over the last 2 years. And if advisors haven't checked in and seen how particularly the impact investment and philanthropy space has moved, this is a very, very good opportunity to do it. One is because I think there's been emerging best practice, which is great to jump on. But two, I really think that in 2022, there will be a lot more demand from the customer and client side. And so it's good to be prepared in advance of that.
Alana, final 30 seconds, words of wisdom to you.
Wonderful. I didn't know I got a slot. Great. So I see a really shifting and dynamic interest between local attention to stuff and global attention to stuff. We're all moving around in different ways than we were before, and also certainly an emphasis on unrestricted funding and trust-based giving. Those are the two things I'm seeing a lot of and that I think are going to increase in the coming 12 months.
Great, thank you. May all of your dreams for 2022 come true in 2022. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, John.
No, thank you.
Bye, everyone. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everyone. Just to let you know that following on from this discussion, next Walk in My Shoes, is looking at DAFs and the benefits of donor advised funds, which is great. And the next event that we're having, so our first hour-long event of this year, which will be a web event, is on how to meet the needs of the next generation. So all very topical from this conversation. Thank you very much, everybody. And